King's Landing was hot, unbearably so for a man used to the biting winds of Winterfell. Sweat clung to Ned Stark's brow, though it wasn't just the southern sun that made him uncomfortable. Every step he took in the Red Keep felt like walking deeper into a den of serpents. Varys' words echoed in his mind. If you want to live, if you want your daughters to live, you must play the game. Honor, duty, truth. These had been his guiding stars his whole life, but now they felt like shackles. He stood in the chambers once belonging to Robert, now claimed by that boy Joffrey, a boy with Lannister blood and Baratheon arrogance. Ned knew the truth. He had the parchment. Stannis was the rightful heir, not Joffrey. And yet, to declare that truth meant war, meant risking Sansa, Arya, even Robb. He had already seen what Cersei was capable of. If he followed honor blindly, his family would pay in blood. So when Littlefinger approached him again, whispering deals in the dark, Ned listened. Proclaim Joffrey as king. Bend the knee, Ned. Let the Lannisters think you're beaten. It buys time, and time is the only currency that matters in this city. For once, Ned didn't argue. He nodded. That evening, in the throne room filled with schemers and snakes, Ned Stark took the scroll naming Stannis rightful king and burned it. Gasps filled the room. The fire flickered, eating away at the parchment. Cersei's eyes widened in shock. Even she hadn't expected this. I, Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Hand of the King, he said, voice steady, recognized Joffrey Baratheon as the rightful heir. The words tasted like poison, but he swallowed them for Arya ... for the family that still needed him. Littlefinger smiled behind him. Varys blinked slowly, curious and perhaps a little impressed. Cersei approached, careful and graceful, like a lioness who'd just discovered her prey wasn't as weak as she thought. You surprise me, Lord Stark, she purred. You shouldn't, he said. A man will do anything to protect his children. And just like that, the game changed. Joffrey grinned wickedly. Then rise, Lord Stark, and swear your fealty. Ned went down on one knee. The hall murmured. The North would howl in fury, but he needed to stay alive, needed to send secret ravens, needed to prepare Robb. In the shadows, Arya watched from her hiding place behind a pillar. Her fingers clenched around the hilt of her sword. She didn't understand why her father knelt. She didn't understand betrayal yet. Later that night, Ned sat in his chamber alone, hands trembling. He had lied to the realm, lied to the memory of Jon Arryn, lied to Robert's ghost, but the faces of his daughters haunted him more than any broken vow. He had chosen them. Not honor, not justice. Them, the wolf had laid down before the lion, and now he had to live with what came next. The raven arrived at Winterfell just before dawn. Maester Luwin unrolled the scroll with shaking fingers, his breath catching when he read the contents. Robb Stark stood by the window, watching the snowfall, his first real storm as Lord of Winterfell. The raven's message cut deeper than any blade. Your father has bent the knee to Joffrey Baratheon. He has recognized him as king. Robb clenched his fists. This can't be true. Maester Luwin hesitated. It is sealed by your father's hand. Robb turned away, his voice raw. He would never serve them, but he had. Far south, in the golden halls of the Red Keep, Ned Stark moved through corridors thick with whispers and thin smiles. To the court, he was the man who had knelt. To his daughters, he was the father who had betrayed everything he stood for. Arya wouldn't speak to him. He hadn't even known she'd been hiding in the throne room when he'd pledged loyalty. Now she watched him with eyes that no longer sparkled with wonder, only quiet, smouldering rage. Sansa, on the other hand, was almost gleeful. Her betrothal to Joffrey was back on track. She believed her father had finally seen reason, that they could remain in King's Landing, that fairy tales might still be true. She didn't know the truth of Joffrey's blood. Ned had buried that knowledge deep now, along with his honor. He couldn't risk her knowing. If she slipped, if she let even a hint of that truth escape, it would be the end of them all. Varys visited him again that night, walking like a ghost in silk. "You've chosen a path, Lord Stark. Not one I expected, but interesting. Don't mistake pragmatism for weakness," Ned said, not looking up. "Oh, I don't, but others will. And you know what happens to men who kneel too long in the capital?" Ned didn't reply. He already knew. Cersei sent him gifts, new cloak in gold and crimson, fine wine, even a Lannister blazoned sword. It was a mockery. She wanted him dressed like a dog that had learned its place. He returned each gift without a word, but he played the part. He attended small council meetings, gave vague, non-committal advice. Let the Lannisters think he was broken. Meanwhile, ravens flew north, carrying cryptic messages wrapped in codes Robb would understand. "Winter is not blind," one read. "The wolf still watches." And yet, with every day that passed, Ned felt himself slipping further into something he couldn't escape. His lie was now the foundation of a kingdom. If he exposed Joffrey now, it wouldn't just cost him his head. It would start a war between every house sworn to the Starks, Baratheons, and Lannisters. Thousands would die. So he endured, but not everyone accepted his silence. Renly Baratheon came to him late one night, cloaked and alone. "You were supposed to support Stannis," he hissed. "The realm needed a strong hand, not a man to frightened to stand by the truth. I did what I had to do." "No," Renly said coldly. "You did what was easy." Ned had no answer to that. Arya ran away 3 days later. They found her in Flea Bottom, bruised and filthy, hiding in the back of a butcher's shop with needle clutched in her hand. When Ned saw her, she didn't cry or shout. She just stared. "I don't know who you are anymore," she said. Neither did he. The North would not kneel. Robb Stark stood before his bannermen in the great hall of Winterfell, his voice trembling with fury more than nerves. The raven from his father was still clutched in his hand, but it felt like a stranger's words. Now, men who had sworn loyalty to Eddard Stark looked at his son and saw something colder, something harder. "He says we must accept Joffrey," Robb said, his eyes scanning the room. "He says peace is worth this, ... shame." Whispers rustled through the chamber like leaves in wind. Great John Umber slammed his fist on the table, sloshing ale over its edge. "Peace bought with a lion's coin is no peace at all. Your father must be under duress, boy." "He wouldn't lie," Robb said. But even as he spoke the words, doubt wrapped around them like frost. Mage Mormont stood, her voice fierce and proud. "He might like to protect his daughters. That's what a father does. But what do we do? Sit here and watch the South swallow the North." Robb's knuckles whitened. "No, we ride." They cheered not for Ned, but for Robb, for a boy becoming a wolf. In King's Landing, the consequences of Ned's betrayal of truth grew thorns. Arya had changed. She no longer wandered the halls or asked questions. She watched, silently. She eavesdropped on the court, stole bits of information from servants and guards. She practiced with needle when no one was looking. Her father noticed the quiet defiance in her eyes, so much like Lyanna's, and it broke him. Sansa, on the other hand, basked in her illusion. Joffrey had returned to his cruel games, but she refused to see it. The wedding plans moved forward, the songs resumed, and she told herself her father's sacrifice meant her dreams were safe. But dreams died fast in King's Landing. On the day of a feast honoring the king's loyal subjects, a rumor reached the small council. Robb Stark had called the banners. The North was marching. Cersei's smile didn't reach her eyes. So, the wolf whelps bite. Littlefinger leaned in close to her ear, and the father kneels to protect them. Quite the family portrait. Varys said nothing. His eyes flicked to Ned. Later, in a quiet corridor, Cersei cornered Ned with Seer Meryn in tow. "You thought surrender would spare your family," she said. "But now your boy marches to war, and you've given me the perfect excuse to crush him." Ned met her gaze. "He's not marching for me." She smiled. "No, he's marching because you betrayed what you are. And now they all bleed for it." The words stung more than steel. That night, Ned summoned Arya. "You need to leave this city," he said softly, kneeling to her height. Her arms crossed. "Running again. Surviving. I don't want to survive. I want to fight. You're not ready." "I was ready the day you lied to everyone." He winced. "I did it to save you. Then maybe I was better off being your daughter than your excuse." He reached for her, but she stepped back. "I'll go," she said, "but not because I'm afraid. I'll go because the next time you see me, I won't be a girl hiding behind shadows." Then she was gone, and Eddard Stark, once Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North, sat alone in a castle full of enemies. His hands stained by a peace that had already begun to unravel. The raven from the south arrived in Winterfell, blood-specked and missing feathers. Robb ripped the parchment open with shaking hands, reading his father's newest words by firelight. They were code to subtle for southern eyes, but sharp as a blade to the boy who'd grown up hearing them whispered. "Snow falls faster than fire burns. The garden is not safe. The wolves must move as one." It was a warning, not to attack, to prepare for betrayal. Robb looked up at his bannermen. The march had already begun, but this message confirmed his fear. Peace was a trap, and the Lannisters would use his father's false fealty as a leash to hang the North. At Moat Cailin, he met with his war council. The map sprawled before him, pins and sigils marking roads, rivers, and rival armies. "We strike Lannister camps before they unite," he said. "Quick and brutal. We don't fight for honor. We fight for survival." They nodded. Robb was no longer a boy, they saw it now. His father's dishonor had become his war drum. Meanwhile, Arya crept through the shadows of King's Landing like a ghost. She had slipped out of the Red Keep using a washerwoman's clothes, and now followed a butcher's cart through the streets, avoiding gold cloaks and informants. She had needle hidden beneath her tunic and her father's coin sewn into the hem of her sleeve. Each step took her closer to the northern gate, but someone followed her. Jaqen Garstill, unnamed and silent, watched from alleys, impressed by her instinct but aware she was still raw, still loud, still not ready yet. He made no move to stop her. A girl who walks in silence might walk in shadows one day. In the Red Keep, Ned Stark met with Varys once more, this time in the dark below the castle, where the walls wept and rats scurried without shame. "You need to act," Varys said. the North marches. If Rob wins, they will call you traitor. If he loses, they will call you father to one. Either way, you hang. I've lived long enough with lies, Ned muttered. Then die with them, Varys asked. Or twist them one more time for your daughter's sake. I can get Arya out, but not if you draw too much attention. So play the part. Be their loyal fool. Ned closed his eyes. What's the price? Silence, obedience, and trust in the very people you despise. Elsewhere in the city, Sansa clung to her wedding dream with both hands. But Joffrey had grown crueler, mocking her in court, calling her father the bent wolf in front. Of the nobles, she laughed when he laughed, but her smiles were hollow. When she confronted her father in the Godswood, he barely looked at her. Why did you kneel? She asked, her voice small. You told us to stand for what's right. I knelt, Ned said slowly, because I would not watch you die screaming in a square. She didn't respond, but her face hardened. Even she could feel the weight of his betrayal, now not of the crown, but of the truth she had been raised to believe in. In the capital, Tywin Lannister sent orders to rally more forces toward the Riverlands. Robb Stark was moving faster than expected. Jaime was trapped in a campaign of skirmishes, and word of small northern victories reached the city daily. Cersei began to panic, but in her way, bold and full of venom. If Robb crosses the Trident, she told the council, then House Stark becomes a rebellion. Littlefinger smirked. They already are. They just haven't declared it yet. Ned listened quietly. Inside, he was crumbling. Every move he had made to protect his children had started to unravel. His choice had bought time, but time was bleeding, and the city smelled war. That night, Ned received a final note. Not from the North, not from his daughters, from Stannis. You chose the lion's lie over the truth. When the fire comes, remember the blood you drowned in. Ned stared at the flames in the hearth and realized something awful. He had tried to save everyone by becoming something he wasn't. But no one trusts a Stark who doesn't bite. The bells of King's Landing tolled early, loud and unexpected, drawing the city from its slumber. Smoke curled from Flea Bottom, thick and grey, signaling more than just a fire. Panic spread quickly among the people, rumours swirling faster. Then the wind, the North, had taken the Trident. Lannister scouts routed Jaime, missing. In the Red Keep, Cersei stood before the Iron Throne, her knuckles white on the armrest. Where's Tywin? She snapped. No one had an answer. Ned Stark was summoned. He entered with his usual quiet, but the eyes that met him were different now. Cersei didn't see a broken man anymore. She saw something worse, a Stark who might be pretending. You said you bent the knee, she hissed, but your wolves are slaughtering my soldiers. Did you plan this? No, Ned said calmly. I warned you. My son acts on his own. He doesn't answer to the crown. You expect me to believe that boy's gone rogue. Please, your silence was your shield. Now it's your noose. Littlefinger leaned beside her, arms crossed. Perhaps it's time we remind the realm what happens to liars. Cersei nodded. Put him in chains. Ned didn't resist. They threw him into the black cells beneath the Red Keep, where the light barely reached and the rats ran freely. The chill of the stone walls reminded him of Winterfell, but the stench of filth and blood reminded him of where he truly was now, the belly of the beast. And yet Ned felt something unexpected relief. The lie had lived long enough. Let it die with him. But it wasn't over. That night, the cell door opened with a creak. Varys stepped in, his robes trailing behind him, his face unreadable. Your family is in more danger now than ever. I know, Ned rasped. You don't, Varys said flatly. Cersei plans to use Sansa as a hostage. Joffrey's wrath grows. And Arya ... she's vanished. If she's caught, they'll parade her body through the streets. Ned's fists clenched. What do you want from me? I want you to live, Varys said. Even now, you hold value. Confess treason. Say you lied. Say you plotted with Renly, or Stannis, or the gods themselves. They'll let you take the black. Ned laughed bitterly. So lie again. Lie and live, or tell the truth and die, your choice. Lord Stark. In the north, Robb had taken the twins after a ruthless 3-day siege. Walder Frey refused him passage at first, so Robb didn't ask twice. He took it by fire and steel. There were no songs about that victory only. Stories of what the young wolf had become. The boy has no patience, Roose Bolton murmured. A dangerous trait, but useful. Word of Ned's imprisonment reached the camp. Robb read the message in silence. Then he ordered every Lannister prisoner shackled and their banners torn down. We march south, he told his commanders. Not for glory, not for revenge. For what then, Great John? Umber asked. Robb looked out across the muddy camp. For the lie they made my father carry. Back in the Red Keep, Sansa begged for her father's life, sobbing before Joffrey. He smiled sweetly, promised mercy, but his words dripped with something darker. If he confesses, he lives. If not, his head will feed the crows. Ned was brought before the crowd days later, thin, hollow-eyed, but standing. He looked out and saw her Sansa pleading silently. He looked up at the sky. Then he spoke. I conspired with traitors. I sought to deny Joffrey his crown. I ... I was wrong. A murmur spread. The nobles smirked. The peasants jeered. And Joffrey ... Joffrey stood with fire in his eyes. My mother wants mercy, he said. But I am king. The High Septon nodded. Then what is your judgment, your grace? Joffrey raised his hand. Bring me his head, Cersei gasped. Sansa screamed. Even Littlefinger's grin faded, but the guards hesitated, because the crowd had changed. Northern banners were flying quietly, defiantly from rooftops. And from the shadows of the city, Arya Stark watched, dagger in hand, waiting for the signal no one had given her but one she knew was coming. Steel rang through the air before the sword ever did. The moment Seer Ilyn Payne stepped forward, the Red Keep's courtyard erupted into chaos. Someone threw a stone, then another, and then came the shouting half, the crowd screaming for mercy, the other half for blood. Ned Stark kneeled before the executioner, his heart already resigned. But his eyes were searching the edges of the square, the rooftops, the guards' faces. Something was wrong. No, something was right. A hawk call pierced the air. It wasn't a bird. It was a signal from the crowd, disguised nor revealed themselves, tearing off merchant robes to expose mail underneath, crossbows raised, blades drawn. From the gates, a hidden cart burst open. Wildlings and bannermen of House Mormont spilled out, cutting through the gold cloaks in tight formation, and from the shadows near the sept, Arya lunged forward like a shadow with teeth. Needle flashed upward. A guard collapsed before he could even cry out. She wasn't aiming for Ilyn Payne, not yet. Her eyes were locked on Sansa, who stood frozen near the dais, a dozen paces away, crying, Ned moved before he understood why. The moment the fighting started, Seer Meryn closed in on Sansa, drawing his blade, and Ned's wrists still bound rose like winter wind. He rammed his shoulder into the knight's back, knocking him off balance. They tumbled down the steps. Steel sliced Ned's arm. He didn't stop. Above him, Ilyn Payne looked confused now. Order had been given. Cersei screamed for the guards. Joffrey panicked and tried to flee. The crowd turned into a sea of chaos. The North had risen. Varys watched from a balcony, unmoving, a faint sadness in his eyes. In the tower, Littlefinger cursed, flipping a table and knocking over his wine. This wasn't the deal, but it was too late. Arya reached her sister, cutting her free from the guards. "Run," she shouted. Now, Sansa stumbled behind her, barefoot, sobbing. But Arya didn't look back. She dragged her sister through a side gate left unlocked by a squire from House Reader, favor owed to the north. Down below, Ned fought like a man possessed. Every ounce of the man who rode with Robert, who faced Mance, raiders, and broke the Boltons, came flooding back. Bloodied and unarmed, he knocked Meryn aside and grabbed a fallen axe. But he was bleeding, deep, too deep. When Robb's sigil rose over the gate-grey, direwolf on White Ned saw it through the blur in his eyes. "My boy," he whispered. He came, and then, from the gate, Robb did ride in. 20 northern horsemen with him. The twins had given him passage, in the end, when war forced even cowards to choose. Robb leapt from his saddle, fighting, his way through Lannister men like a storm breaking chains, and then he saw him. His father, collapsed in blood. Ned tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. "Get a Mester," Robb roared. Now, Arya reappeared, dragging through the bloodied path. When she saw her brother, she ran into him and broke shaking, gasping, crying for everything they had lost. Joffrey was gone, Cersei was fleeing with her guard. The gold cloaks were turning coats faster than lightning. The city was falling, but not to dragons or fire. To wolves. Ned Stark lived, but barely. That night, they took him to the Tower of the Hand. Mester Pycelle worked over him with trembling hands while Robb sat by his side, blood still caking his armor. "You lied," Robb said, voice low. "I did. You bent the knee. You said Joffrey was king. I did. Why?" Ned turned his head. His voice was little more than a whisper. "Because sometimes the truth kills faster than a sword." Outside, the city burned in pockets, but inside, House Stark had risen from its knees, and the South would never see the North the same again. Dawn in King's Landing brought no peace, only smoke and silence. The Red Keep stood scarred. Bodies littered the courtyard, and pools of blood had begun to dry between the stones. Northern banners flew from the towers, but their presence was fragile like frost over fire. The city had not truly been taken. It had cracked. Robb Stark stood at the window of the Tower of the Hand, staring down at the streets below. They had won, but it didn't feel like victory. His father lay behind him, pale and stitched. The Maester said he'd live, but with the pain, with weakness, with wounds that would not fully heal. Robb hadn't cried, not once. Not even when Arya told him what she'd seen, how close Ned had come to dying. There was no time for tears. The Queen was gone. Cersei had fled with what remained of the gold cloaks and loyal knights, retreating to Maegor's Holdfast. She had Joffrey, Tommen, and Myrcella with her, and she still held the treasury, which meant she still held power. "You need to be crowned," said Greyjohn Umber. "Right here, right now." while their heads are still spinning. I'm not a king, Rob said. Not while my father still breathes. Then act like one, Roose Bolton murmured, before the lioness strikes back. Ned stirred behind them. Don't let the blood blind you, he whispered. Victory can become a cage, fast. But even as he spoke, the trap was already being laid. In the shadows of the throne room, Littlefinger returned, quietly, unexpectedly. They think I fled, he told Varys. Let them believe it a little longer. You've backed the Starks now, Varys asked, raising an eyebrow. I've backed chaos. Chaos always pays. He approached Rob days later, offering terms and influence. You need legitimacy. You need coin. You need the city's support. I don't need you, Rob growled. Oh, but you do, Littlefinger smiled. Because if you don't act fast, your father will become a symbol of rebellion, not unity. The nobles love survivors, Lord Stark, but they worship martyrs. Rob nearly struck him, but Arya stopped him. He's a snake, she whispered. But snakes can still bite your enemies. So Rob listened, and made his first deal with the devil. Sansa remained distant. She barely spoke to Arya, and avoided her father's bedside. Something inside her had shattered that day. She had believed in beauty, in crowns, in the gentle lie of southern grace. Now she saw its real shape, bloody, cruel. She sat alone in the gardens, refusing food, speaking only when forced. Arya didn't push her. Not yet, but she followed her. Because Sansa had started whispering with the guards again. Started receiving sealed notes. Arya didn't trust it. Not anymore. Meanwhile, in the Riverlands, Tywin Lannister rallied what remained of his forces. Messages flew like crows across the kingdom, demands for allies, threats for loyalty, and one went south, to Stannis. Cersei's last gambit was desperate but clever. She wrote to the one man who hated the Starks and the Lannisters in equal measure. She offered him something neither had considered, a path to the throne over both their bodies. In the blackness of Dragonstone, Stannis read her letter and smiled. Back in the city, Ned awoke fully for the first time. Arya sat beside him. He looked older, weaker, but still himself. Did you hate me? He asked quietly. Arya blinked. No, you should have. I almost cost us everything. You saved us, she said. You just didn't do it the way heroes are supposed to. Ned reached for her hand. I was never a hero, he said. I was just a father. And as the wind carried new banners across the city, and the north held the south by the throat, one thing was clear: the game was still on, and betrayal had only begun. The moon over King's Landing looked pale and distant as if even the gods were reluctant to watch what was coming. Inside the great hall of the Red Keep, Robb Stark stood where so many kings had stood before him, at the base of the Iron Throne. He didn't sit on it. He couldn't. Not yet. His father had survived, but barely. The Northern Army occupied the city, but tenuously. And the people, those ragged, hungry eyes in the streets, didn't love him. They feared him, and that fear wasn't enough. Not with what was coming. A raven had arrived from Dragonstone. Stannis Baratheon had declared himself king. He named Joffrey a bastard, Ned Stark a traitor, and Robb an opportunist. He claimed divine right through the Lord of Light. And worse, he had ships. Hundreds. The war was not over. It had just begun again. Ned, though recovering, could not walk unaided. He spent most days in silence, and the quiet weighed on Robb. More than any counsel, in private, Robb snapped. you should have never bent the knee. We wouldn't be in this mess if you'd just told the truth." Ned looked at him long and hard. "You think truth is a sword you can swing and win every fight? It's not." "Then what was it for?" Rob spat. "What was all of it for?" Ned didn't answer, because the answer was already dead buried beneath the bodies of men who had trusted him, or hated him, or followed him for reasons even they couldn't name. Meanwhile, Arya had tracked Sansa's betrayal to a single note, hidden in her cloak. A letter sealed with the sigil of the lion. Arya confronted her under the old godswood tree, the last weirwood left in the city. "You're talking to them," she said. "You're feeding them information." Sansa flinched. "I'm not. I just... ... I just want peace. If I give them something, maybe they'll listen. They'll use you, again. Like Joffrey did." Sansa's voice cracked. "And what have you done, Arya?" "Stabbed men in alleys, spied like a rat. I've survived, for you." But Sansa was already walking away, and Arya, heart-pounding, didn't follow. That night, Arya slipped the note to Robb. It was a map showing secret tunnels beneath the keep, the same Cersei would use to escape. Robb said nothing, but his jaw tightened. The next day, Robb gave orders to seal the tunnels. But someone had already acted, because when the city woke on the third day, Cersei was gone. Joffrey was found in his chambers dead, poisoned, foaming. At the mouth, a final grotesque mask over his spoiled face. The city cheered. Sansa screamed, because the cup had been meant for her, and the poison was northern. Whether planted by Arya or Littlefinger or someone else entirely, no one could say. But the damage was done. Cersei vanished into the east. Some said she was on a Braavosi ship. Others claimed she rode toward dawn, seeking old enemies who might become allies. The city was bleeding again. The small council had no king. The realm had no center, and the Iron Throne sat empty. Robb did not claim it. Instead, he gathered his army. He helped his father mount a horse for the first time in weeks. He kissed his sisters goodbye. Sansa, now kept under close watch. Arya, given leave to travel under a different name. And he said only one thing to the lords of the realm before he left. The North remembers, and it will never bow again. He rode out of the Red Keep, not as a conqueror, but as something colder. The direwolf who had tasted Betrayerland decided never to bleed for the South again. As winter began to descend over the realm, and the long war swallowed banners in blood and fire, Ned Stark watched his son disappear into the distance, and he realized this. He had broken his honor to save his family, but in doing so, he had broken the world they once knew.